It's been the subject of successive deals between successive governments in the UK and France. But despite the millions of pounds spent trying to reduce the number of people crossing, a new deal was signed today, an acknowledgement that the current one isn't working. This morning in Paris, the Home Secretary committed more money to France, but perhaps learning lessons from predecessors, avoided overpromising on what it would achieve.
There's no single answer, there's no quick fix, there's no silver bullet. Our cooperation and collaboration with the French on the Channel, on the UK coastline, on the French coastline is absolutely integral to ensuring that there is a robust barrier preventing people disembarking from the French beaches in the first place.
Under the new deal, the amount paid to France will increase from £55 to £63 million per year. The money will fund a 40% increase in beach patrols, around 100 officers, as well as new surveillance equipment. And British officers will be stationed in French control rooms for the first time, and vice versa. It comes as the number of people who've made the crossing topped 40,000 this year, the highest on record. That's over 10,000 more than the whole of last year, and more than 4 times the year before that. And emerging from the Dover fog this morning, hundreds more who made the crossing, sailing into a tense political backdrop on migration and an asylum system that's almost ground to a halt. Whether today's deal is successful in bringing down the number of people arriving here won't really be known for at least 5 months while the French resource the plan. But preventing people from making the dangerous crossing is just part of the puzzle. Another major element not addressed today is the huge backlog and delays in processing asylum claims.
It's crazy that we have people who've been waiting 2 years or more than 2 years for their claims to be processed. It's damaging for them and it's expensive for us, and it doesn't help anybody. So all that money that's being paid for hotels, just a little bit of that could be used to fund the Home Office to have the right people making the right decisions for everybody. We know it's possible to give people safe passage because we did it for Ukrainians and it worked. So why aren't we looking at ways to give other refugees safe passage in a similar way to Ukrainians?
Fed up with yet another deal similar to the last, this French mayor says it's towns like his that suffer because of Britain's failed immigration policies.
This new accord is one more agreement. Frankly, I don't think it would solve our or your problem, you know. So we are a little disappointed about that.
Do you think it's a waste of money, this new agreement, if it's not going to solve it, as you say?
It's not only a money problem, it's a political problem in Europe, and it's a political problem in England, because it's so easy to have a new life in England. So you have to stop that. And maybe you had less migrants in your country and less migrants in the north of France, in Calais, in Dunkirk. So your problem is our problem also.
The government faced similar criticism from their own backbenchers today, saying the agreement falls short of what's needed. A new deal perhaps, but the same doubts over the effectiveness linger.
Well, joining me now from Westminster is the Conservative MP and former Immigration Minister Caroline Nokes. There have been so many of these deals over the year, haven't there? Almost one a year recently. What makes you think this one will be any different, any better?
Well, it's about incremental progress and making the significant change that we see today, which is going to involve, for the first time, British officers in French centres looking at the intelligence that's coming in. And I feel quite optimistic, although tempered by the very realistic attitude of both the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, that there is no single silver bullet that is going to solve this crisis.
Natalie Elphicke is the Tory MP, of course, for Dover. She says this deal is more of the same and it doesn't match the scale or the urgency of the problem. In the end, it's £8 million more, isn't it? Do you think that the Prime Minister, the Home Secretary, could have been more ambitious?
Well, it's additional funding, it's CCTV on the French coastline, it's an increase in patrols of 40%, which I think is absolutely very significant and could have a successful impact in reducing the number of crossings. I think Natalie is right to be concerned. It is her constituency that has absolutely borne the brunt of arrivals and is dealing with local community tensions. And Natalie speaks up for her constituents. But the reality is that this crisis will only be solved with cooperation with the French.
Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, has said that the immigration system is broken. But if it is broken after 12 years of Tory government, isn't it Tory governments who have broken it?
Well, we inherited a significant backlog of asylum claims, have worked consistently over the past 12 years to try and reform the asylum system. I think there are more changes that could be made. We need to get those backlogs down. I would like to see an expedited process for those people coming here from Afghanistan, for instance, where we know we are not going to return people to the Taliban. That could be one way to reduce the backlog. But the reality is, when it comes to a global migration crisis, we need to cooperate with our European neighbours, obviously with France at the forefront of that, but also further on the coastline with Belgium, where we know that small boats have launched from in the past. And I think it's important that we approach this with a very collaborative attitude towards the EU.
You mentioned the backlog. The backlog for processing asylum applications in the UK now stands at over 100,000. So today we're looking at the French end of things, but shouldn't we be looking at our end of things? That's a total failure, isn't it?
We can't look at any part of the immigration and asylum system in isolation. That's the stark reality. Much of the backlog has been caused by the significant influx of small boat crossings from France. So it's important that we take the steps that have been taken today, that is addressed. But equally, you will always find me saying that more needs to be done to address the backlog, that we have to speed up decision making, that we could look at applications from countries like Syria, like Iran. These are both countries that we're not going to return people to, and see how we can expedite those claims and make sure that people are able to go out and work and support themselves rather than sitting in taxpayer-funded accommodation reliant upon the British taxpayer.
Well, refugee groups say that the reason people are crossing is because there is no safe route for them to claim asylum from elsewhere unless they come from Ukraine or, for a smaller number, from Afghanistan. Wouldn't that be part of the solution, to actually open up some safe routes for people to come over?
Well, there are already safe routes like the refugee family reunion, and I think that's an important route. We have a significant number of people come here every year using that route. But I think we have to be much more creative and not just look to old solutions. There are all sorts of discussions about whether you should be able to claim asylum from a third country. Now, look, that breaks the principles that we have consistently worked upon through history, ever since the Refugee Convention was set up, that you have to be in the UK to claim asylum. I think it's important that the government has an open mind, that they look at all of the options. But I would like to see the reinstatement of something like the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Scheme, which when I was Immigration Minister, we saw come almost to its conclusion, resettling 20,000 vulnerable migrants. I want to see the government look at routes like that, make sure that the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme is running effectively, that we are not just moving to make sure that we have people who worked with us in Afghanistan, but also the vulnerable people who are disabled, women, LGBT people from Afghanistan. And I think it's crucial that the government continues to redouble its efforts with France and looks to what more it can do around resettlement.